fossil fuel divestment from the UW Divestment Coalition. Awesome. Okay, so what is divestment? So divestment is basically the opposite of investment. It's when you take away money from unethical funds. And when we talk about divestment, we're specifically referring to liquidated assets. And so we're referring to stocks and bonds that are like quite literally invested as you would invest your own funds. And so we are referring to divestment, which is pulling funds out of those stocks and such. So divestment is not a super original idea at this point. There have been successful South African apartheid movements. Actually, UW-Madison led one back in the 70s, I want to say 80s. I'm going to say 80s, but don't quote me on that. And so South African apartheid was a big movement at the time. And then we've also had divestment efforts for tobacco, Palestine, and the prison industrial complex. Palestine and the prison industrial complex specifically are growing movements right now, as well as fossil fuel divestment that we're focusing on today. I also wanted to point out this image on the bottom right hand. This is from UW Stevens Point. There I am holding up a microphone and or megaphone. And we were last fall doing or last spring doing a bike rally event to promote our efforts. Awesome. Okay, I guess I'm going to say awesome at every slide, so be aware. So fossil fuel divestment. This, like I said, it's not an original idea. There have been over 100 universities across the US that have divested. Just the other day, well, just yesterday, recently, University of Minnesota just came out and did it. University of Michigan has divested. Harvard has divested. They had a huge movement of like over 10 years, really strong pushing for this. Seattle University, California State, University of Dayton, Stanford, University of Vermont are just a few of the many, many universities that have divested from fossil fuels. So in here, this is one of our banner drops that we host to educate students on what's going on. This is from the bike rally, and then this is just some cool patches that were made. So in April of 2020, over a total of 1,192 institutions and over 58,000 individuals representing 14 trillion in assets worldwide have begun or committed to fossil fuel divestment. So this is a growing movement of people that want this to happen. So basically what we are talking about here when we talk about fossil fuel divestment and this whole operation of it, basically what we're referring to is every time someone donates to the university, right? So if I am an alumni or really just someone who wants to donate to the school, let's say I donate $500,000 or $5,000, anything like that. Instead of the funds going directly into the university to get used for, let's say a new basketball court or a new chemistry lab, instead of those funds going directly to it, we invest those funds. Similar to how you would invest your own money because you want the money to grow so that you can have it for years to come, the universities do the same thing, which is really great. However, when we take those funds and we invest them, we are investing in fossil fuel companies. And when I say we, I am referring to university foundations. So you can see right here in the middle, a university foundation is a nonprofit organization that has a strong relationship with the university and takes those funds and invests on behalf of the university's interests. And so then those funds are invested, and slowly over time it's pulled back into the university to be used for operational and just daily functional costs or whatever specific project that donor had wanted to be allocated for. And so this part in the middle, this university foundation part, is what we're really focused on because just starting to question, what is it that we're actually putting these funds towards? What are we promoting with these hundreds of thousands and millions and billions, well, really billions of dollars that we're referring to here. So, arguments for divestment. So, overall, as many of us know, oil and gas are a driving force for climate change. As we increasingly put greenhouse gases into our atmosphere, we are increasingly going to be, or currently are, and going to be experiencing the effects of climate change due to these increased temperatures and such. So, fossil fuels are also a finite resource. UW will have to divest eventually. So, as you know, as you can see, a lot of other universities are divesting. And so that is partially because of the fact that this is just a economy and system structure that we are transitioning away from because we have to. But also, many of our UW campuses have carbon neutrality goals. So basically, I know specifically where I attend at UW Stevens Point, we have one of these, or just have, like, even if it's not a carbon neutrality goal, you have climate goals that we want to reach so that we can reduce our impact. And so a big part of that is through fossil fuel and divestment. It's just one of the pieces. And so we might as well tackle that now rather than later. So another point is the fact that when we decide to invest in fossil fuels now, we're not just helping the business of it now, we are choosing to invest in these projects naturally that will be around for at least 30 to 50 years, right? And so if we're putting in a new oil refinery, or new pipeline updates, we are contributing to new infrastructure rather than transitioning and putting those funds towards more transitional infrastructure towards renewable and clean energy opportunities, or just building more resilient climate resilient communities. So also, investing in fossil fuels will damage the future of Wisconsin students and communities. So it seems counterintuitive, the fact that these alumni are donating to the university because they want the future to be better. Investing in higher education, you want educated individuals in our communities so that we can change the world, right? Which is amazing, but it is turning into, naturally, when they invest in these companies, creating more damaging impacts through fossil fuel investment. And our last reason is we can reinvest, right? So we're not just pulling out these funds. It's not like we're not going to make a profit. Like it's going to affect us terribly economically. Just shifting those into companies that make more sense for our state, so that we can move closer to energy independence rather than depending so much on fossil fuel imports. All right, so some more specifics just about the financial side of fossil fuel divestment. So if you started this campaign, 10, 20 years ago, it would have been a little bit harder to advocate for on the financial side, just because fossil fuels used to be something really valuable to be invested in. And at this point, over time, that has really changed. And so we recently, as a campaign, met with Claire Brown, which is an economics professor from the California system, from Berkeley. Is it Berkeley? Yes. And she gave us some really insightful information. And one of these was this graph. And so if you look at it, what it's showing us here is the fact that S&P 500 companies which are the top 500 companies to be invested in, have tripled their investment returns over time. And so these companies are progressively improving and are well-worthy investments, right? But when you specifically look at energy companies, only about 2% of the investment returns exist in comparison to the 300. And so if you see this graph here, the blue is the top S&P 500 and how it's been growing over time. And we have isolated out Chevron and Exxon. And as you can see, Chevron's still improving. However, Exxon is on its way doing pretty poorly. And so, like I said, it just doesn't make as much sense economically. That's one of the things that the foundations and the Board of Regents typically lean on, is that, hey, we're just making the best financial argument for it being invested in fossil fuels, and we have to do what's best to grow the donors' funds. However, it's proving that it's just not the best economical choice anymore, and that we can move away from it. Here, I just also wanted to show another chart. As you can see, in the 1980s, these are the top 10 companies to be invested in at the time. And so here we have just, 9 out of 10 of these, not 9 out of 10, 7 out of 10 of these are oil-related companies. And over time, we have shifted away from those, and we have a lot more diverse array of companies to be invested in instead. Another reason is fossil fuel investments will specifically impact certain projects. And I just wanted to compare it to, or not compare, I wanted to connect it to what's going on with Enbridge Line 3. And so Enbridge Line 3 is a tar sands oil pipeline that is set to be put in from Alberta, Canada, down to Superior, Wisconsin. And it's going to go through wetlands, other unique valuable habitat, and also Anishinaabe tree land, right? And so this pipeline is going to have impact on the communities that exist there, the wildlife, the ecosystems, and sadly, these pipelines spill. And so by investing in fossil fuels, we're indirectly choosing to support these types of infrastructure improvements as Enbridge goes to build the pipeline. Also, when pipelines are being built, they have some pretty terrible impacts on the community. So typically, you have a plethora of married and single men who need some attention, apparently. And so it's very common for Indigenous women to be trafficked and abused sexually and physically throughout this process and taken advantage of. And it only really exacerbates the experiences that these marginalized communities are going through. And so fossil fuel investments directly tie to this type of these issues that are occurring in the Midwest. I also wanted to point out, this is from UW-Madison. This was from a rally that we had last spring. And I thought it was just a really beautiful banner. And then we also had some from one of our events last year at UW-Eau Claire. So specifically referring to the UW system. So basically, out of our 13 campuses, the largest foundation is called the UW Foundation. Each of the schools have their own foundations. However, this one has about $4 billion invested, not specifically in fossil fuels, but just invested. It's called an endowment portfolio that of all the investment choices that they make. And so the UW Foundation is not super transparent with the public about what they're investing in. And partially that is because these are constantly changing, and there are many, many accounts that they are working with and investing in. And so that can make it tough to publicly display. However, it's hard for us as a campaign to know what's being invested in and what companies we are specifically working with. However, with fossil fuel divestment, it's one of those things where unless you specifically divest, you're most likely investing. They estimate that typically about 5% of an endowment is in fossil fuel related companies. And so in total, each, including the UW Foundation and all the other foundations, we predict there's about $7 billion in endowment funds. And none of these university foundations have decided to divest from fossil fuels. For our campaign specifically, we are focused on the UW Foundation in Madison because if they divest, it is way, way more likely that the dominoes will fall and the other schools will follow suit. All right. So with all of this background information, we decided to create what is called the UW Divestment Coalition. And so with the UW Divestment Coalition, our mission is to unite universities throughout the University of Wisconsin system to demand a just divestment from fossil fuels to combat the climate crisis. We are a student-led grassroots movement with students from all across the state. We have decided to work at the system level rather than individual at the campuses, because many of the campuses specifically rely on the UW Foundation to make their investment decisions on their behalf. Like, for example, I mentioned earlier, I go to UW Stevens Point, and we have an endowment of $40 million. We have a foundation, the UWSP Foundation. However, our endowment is actually being transferred over to UW Foundation in Madison and being managed there. And so if they divest, that will also inherently divest our university. And there's a couple of other UW schools that have a similar process. I also want to mention that when we have spoken with the UW Milwaukee Foundation, they specifically asked, like, what is UW Foundation doing? Are they interested in divestment? Is this on their radar? And so that is UW Milwaukee has the second largest endowment. And so that just kind of proves our thought that they look to UW Foundation as a model. And so it's really important that we understand that all of these universities are interconnected and do not operate on their own necessarily. All right. Another reason why we work at the system level is because it's a great way to share resources so that we're not necessarily creating this overlap all the time, and we don't have these isolated campaigns. Instead, we can work smarter, not harder, and share the resources, share the work, and yeah, create more of a larger impact statewide pressure. All right, so specifically our goals. So the first thing that we would love to see is achieving some transparency with the UW system about all of our endowment investments so that we can be aware of just the specific numbers that we are investing in. We also want to, of course, divest within 3 to 5 years from all fossil fuel related companies. And so we understand that divestment is a process and that there's a lot of accounts to go through. Things are constantly changing, but I think that we overall just want it to be understood at these foundations that we will avoid these companies and that we will make ethical decisions about where the funds are going moving forward. And I think it should become a standard of practice is what we would like. And then last but not least, we promote having the foundations reinvest in companies that are promoting a sustainable future. This can look like anything, honestly, especially because we know that we're going to have very little say in how things get reinvested. But again, having that theme and that morale behind their thought process is what we really want for them to make the best financial decisions. Here's a couple more banner drop photos. Making a banner. So this coalition, what has been done so far? I promise you, we're not just sitting around twiddling our thumbs, getting mad at the system for the way things are, whatever, blah, blah, blah. You know, we're really working to make things change. And so we have passed student government resolutions. This is just legislation of the student body showing support for fossil fuel divestment. We have 8 or 9 out of 13 of the universities that have passed this. We also have had faculty resolutions passed. We've had them passed at River Falls, La Crosse, Oshkosh, Eau Claire, and Madison, if I never said that, or if I didn't repeat that. So we've also had a variety of media coverage throughout news outlets in the state of Wisconsin. This is really helpful for publicity as well as getting people within and within the university and outside the university aware of our efforts. We've also filed a legal complaint to the state attorney general. Basically, there is a law that helps prove our efforts by indicating that it is basically that is unlawful for them to be investing in fossil fuels based on the university's goals and mission and purpose. And so we filed the complaint, and we're going through a process with that. I also want to point out that last year, the Wisconsin State Climate Task Force had released a climate report, and basically a list of, or a whole array of steps that Wisconsin can take to become more climate resilient and reduce the impacts of climate change. And one of those things that they referred to was university divestment, which was really awesome. Next thing is we've met with a variety of foundation officials across the state, as well as just other professionals that have awareness of endowments and this process. So we've just really been trying to understand their perspective, the challenges of divestment, if they've ever thought about it, and also just to redirect our campaign if it needs to based on the foundation responses. We, of course, also have a petition. We have had over 700 petition signatures. We just made a new one to collect more specific data that will be more beneficial for our campaign. And that one already has 300, which is really great. As you can see in this photo on the right, we did a game night last year. So we do some fun stuff over Zoom. This is some of our student organizers working. Since we have students from across the state, we meet over Zoom. It's just the easiest way to make that happen. And then this is from a divestment rally last spring at Madison. All right, so we did a lot so far, and we still have a lot to do. So some of the overarching themes of the next steps for our campaign are gaining publicity through nonviolent direct actions. So we just went through COVID, and it was really tough to get that in-person interaction publicity about what's actually going on. And so we are hoping to increase the knowledge and understanding of the fact that we're investing in fossil fuels to our students and our communities across the state to build a stronger support system. We will continue to meet with foundations and create the conversation and the community building, the group building that we need with them to move forward. And then we also really understand at this point that what will probably make them divest is the thought of is their public image not necessarily doing the best. So people do not like to be called out. People don't want others telling them or like specifically saying by name what they're doing wrong and like our perspective on it. And so we're definitely going to take advantage of that and hope that that makes a difference, shakes the ground a little bit, and yeah, does what we need it to do. So some of the campaign challenges along the way. So we get a lot of pushback with statements that the foundations are private entities. They do not operate at the, it's not the same as a government agency in terms of it having to like, work under the people and do what the people want. They can make their own decisions. So there is that. We also have had issues because our original course of action was hoping that the UW Board of Regents would write policy stating that they will not accept the funds, the invested funds, until the foundations divest from fossil fuels. However, the Board of Regents state that it's like out of their, sorry, I've got an itch. It's out of their power, which is frustrating because back when the South African apartheid movement occurred, the route of having them divest was by having the Board of Regents take a stance on it and take control over that situation. It's also tough because we have campaign turnover. We have some really, really amazing students, as you can see on the right, that participated in our campaign last year. But we need new students. People graduate, people get busy, people got things to do. And so we are definitely looking for some new students to take over some creative avenues in our campaign and to just continue the work that we need to do. It's also really tough because typically a divestment campaign is one campus. And here we have many, many campuses from across the state. We have many, many foundations. And so we have this really elaborate web of people that we need to communicate with. How you can take action. So after hearing all of that, I hope that you're like, oh my God, I'm super energized. Like, I want to be a part of this. So there's a variety of ways that you can get involved, from a very minimal expectation of involvement to stuff that's more of a regular routine weekly basis work. So the first thing that you could do, I don't really have it on here properly, but basically the first thing you can do is sign our petition. So you can go to the uwdivestment.com to sign our petition. We also have it in the link in our Instagram bio. That is straightforward, the simplest thing you can do. The next thing is like following our social media is really great. Reposting our stuff on your Instagram story. There's a lot of people that pay attention to that stuff. The next thing you can do is specifically joining the coalition itself. And so we are students that meet I need to change this. Okay. It is 7 p.m. I'm going to change that right now. 7 p.m. on Sundays. We meet for the coalition. And so the expectation with meeting weekly is that you shouldn't have to do a lot of work at all during the week. It should be like, okay, we're going to move forward on these tasks and projects one at a time, taking an hour every week. Maybe you'll have 2 or 3 hours, if you have to send some emails or if you really want to do some more tasks. It just depends. But yeah, what we specifically look for roles in students, we have students that run our social media. We have students that write op-eds, which are just like news articles that we send out across the state. We're looking for students to continue our professional inside game side of things by meeting with foundations and chief financial officers and politicians, representatives of the state. So we need students to do that. And we also need students to help with our direct action, nonviolent direct action events. These are super important for gaining publicity and also keeps our social media going and just gets people involved. So that's kind of the main things that we're looking for right now with students. You don't have to have literally any background in anything. It doesn't matter. There are some really amazing patient students that we work with that can train you. This is all a learning opportunity. Our whole goal is to create student leaders and people that feel empowered and confident to take on this type of work once we graduate, right? To be able to say, oh, this is not necessarily how we should be doing things. Let's change it. And how do we make that happen? How do we energize ourselves to create a Wisconsin future that we all want, or just really a world future that we all want, because it's our future, I didn't say this, but you can also attend UWDC events. So getting involved specifically on your campus through the organization that's showing you this recording, through friends that are involved. You can find out stuff on our Instagram and our social media. But yeah, I think this is our last slide. Yep. But yeah, if you have any specific questions, you can definitely reach out to, I don't think it's on here, but uwdivestment@gmail.com. And, or you can also DM us. You can reach out to us on our website to get involved, as well as whatever your the organizer is going to post. All right, so that is it. That is Divestment 101. Thank you all so much for listening, and I hope that we have a really kick butt campaign this year across the state. And yeah, it's gonna be awesome. So good luck, everybody, and I hope to hear from you.